Hey, my name's Eddie with Get Set Go, and in today's video, I'm standing next to the most hated Porsche to date. Yes, I'm talking more hated than the transmissions in the 964 Targa and more hated than the water-cooled engines in the 996 generation. So what does that mean for this video? I can pick the path of what every auto journalist has done and talk about what makes this car so hideous, which is basically only two things. Or I can pick another approach, go against the grain, and talk about what makes this car behind me so special. Clearly, we're gonna pick the latter. I'll be talking about some of the engineering upgrades to the car itself, starting with the big elephant in the room, the engine. I'll talk a little bit about transmission, the sound. I've read a lot of forums, so I know a lot of people's dislikes. We're gonna validate those in today's video. So stay tuned, I'm excited for this video. I have a good feeling it's gonna be a good one. Not much prepared, off the cuff for the most part. Let's see what comes out of it. Okay, so let's start with why this car is so hated. The engine. This engine here is a flat 4 Boxster engine. The previous model had a flat 6 Boxster engine. And that's really the main reason why people hate this car. It just doesn't sound as beefy. It doesn't have that raw driving experience. But I'll tell you what it does have. More power and more fuel. The flat 4 not only means that it creates less friction, but it also means it weighs less. So it's a lot more efficient in not only fuel, but mainly in power as well. This base model here gets a 2-liter displacement engine that produces 300 horsepower. That's a 35 horsepower increase from the base model's 996. The S model gets a 2.5-liter displacement that makes 350 horsepower. Again, 35 horsepower increase from the previous V6 model that it replaces. Porsche has designed the 718 to be significantly more improved than the model that it replaces. First off, the engine is more powerful. The engine is lighter. Suspension is more rigid, and obviously the ride quality is just impeccable. And as a driver, as a real driving enthusiast, what more can you ask for? Besides better exhaust, of course. But on paper, this is actually a much better car. FastestLaps.com showed this car to be competing with many other cars way above its own rank. You have a very rigid chassis that doesn't compromise the quality of the drive itself. Again, the chassis dynamics are just on point. The dampening system does a really good job of picking up some of the imperfections on the road. The good thing this car has going for itself is that it has a lot of low-end torque. Obviously, once you get into those higher gears, you do start to see a lot of turbo lag. And when I was reading forums, I've seen a lot of people complaining about how long first gear is. Quite honestly, it is true, but how often are you really going to be in first gear? But if you are, my hat's off to you. I respect that as well. Some of the other things I was reading is that people like how nimble this car is. You can throw anything at it and it's able to handle that situation. The car knows how to correct itself. There's not so much driver input. Obviously, you're still engaged, but in a situation like I was in where you're kind of losing traction, this car does have your back. What I like is that the steering wheel is right out of the 991 Turbo. So obviously it's 10% much better, more direct than the previous model. I mean, this car can easily be daily drivable. I mean, you guys gotta realize this car is not only cheaper, but it's also much easier to drive than the 911. So remember I told you guys that I was reading forums? Well, I actually made a list of some of the complaints that this car has, okay? Starting with number 1, dipstick. Instead of a dipstick, you actually have an electronic light bulb that notifies you when it's time to change the oil. That's pretty valid. Second one, first gear is really high. I think really high means really long, and I do agree, but let's be real, guys. How often and how long are you gonna be in first gear in this car? I don't think very long. Right? Second, no option to shut off the engine shut-off feature. I do agree with that. It's kind of annoying to be approaching red stops and the engine is constantly shutting off. I'm not sure who invented that. It's just, I feel like that needs to go as well. No keyless entry. Front intake is a leaf magnet, this guy said. But of course, what everyone really complains about is going from 6 down to the flat 4 Boxster. I would say that's valid if this car wasn't more powerful than the other one. Obviously that's not the case. So the real main issue that most people have is the sound itself. It does sound like an STI at lower revs, but once you start kicking it, opening up the throttle, that's when the real Porsche personality starts coming out. Of course, I have no complaints with that one. There was also somebody that mentioned depreciation. The 718 Boxster is so undesired by diehard fans that the values drop significantly. He's saying that the older generations now cost more than this one that replaced it. Whether that's true or not, maybe you guys can do the research and throw it into the comment section below. But that pretty much wraps up the video. For me, this was fun, whether through the city or through the canyons. This car handled anything that I threw into it. It corrected me when I made a mistake, but it still kept me engaged because that still has that predictability factor. So if this is something you guys like, make sure to comment. Let me know that this is something you guys liked. If not, make sure to comment in the section below what I should adjust. I know a lot of you guys gave me feedback in my previous videos, which I do appreciate. Don't you guys think that, you know, I'm taking it the wrong way. I'm taking it all as feedback. So again, until next time guys, take care.